What are the freedoms that licensing gives you instead of the restrictive franchise?
Yeah, it probably has to do with just the obligation of support, and the maybe part of it was the startup and creation of the initial program and those kind of things. Looking back at it when we started where we are now, one thing we learned is that the more significant the initial investment, the greater probability of success.
Mm-hmm.
Which is it's just that qualifying factor. So I think that's one significant advantage that a franchise has.
Yeah.
Over what we're doing.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast, where we talk about all things franchising. Now, here's your host, Dr. John P. Hayes.
Welcoming Tom Ziglar to my program today. I've known Tom since about the time he got involved in his father's business, Zig Ziglar Corporation, based in Dallas, and late 1980s. I think Tom might have worked in the warehouse back then, and shortly after that moved into a sales position. So he had been doing all of the work that any worker bee would do at the Zig Ziglar Corporation, even though he was the son of the famous motivational, just one of the greatest human beings ever, Zig Ziglar, who unfortunately isn't with us anymore. And I was very fortunate to spend time with Zig, to work with him and Tom and others in a professional capacity related to marketing at times. I also went out and did some speaking as one of the signature series speakers for the Ziglar Corporation. And Tom today is the CEO of the Ziglar Corporation. And like his father, writing books, and he's also out speaking. And he has licensed the Ziglar materials to, I don't know how many people, we're going to find out in a moment. And he licensed instead of franchising. And so these are interesting points to talk about today. Tom, welcome, and thank you for taking time to talk with me.
Well, John, it's great to be here. I'm just going down memory lane, and I think we go all the way back to when the internet was new and newsletters were brand new.
Yeah.
And you came in, and how many years did you write our newsletter for?
Yeah, a long time. I think 10 years I did the newsletter. And when we started it, we didn't even have mailing lists. We didn't know that we needed to collect email addresses. I wrote the first newsletter, and I said to you, okay, Tom, give me your email list and we'll send this out. You said, what email list? So you said, we'll collect some, we'll get a list together. Give us a couple days. And you had like 30 people on there that we started out with, but we grew that to 10,000 in no time. Of course, it was Zig Ziglar's material and everybody wanted it. So it was very popular. And that was great doing that e-newsletter. As it was called at the time. I don't think, now we've gone to podcasts and other kinds of messaging through the internet. We've made a lot of progress, but yeah, we were there. We were pioneers, and that was a lot of fun.
We did that, and I'm probably going to get the conversation wrong, but you wrote the newsletter for over a year.
Yeah.
And then you said, we should try to sell something on this newsletter.
Yeah. Right.
And so we made a product offer, old school, old fashioned physical product. And I think we sold more on that first offer than about 2 months worth of product sales. So
yeah, it was amazing.
It was that was back in the day when the email was anticipated and valued, and people said yes because they hadn't seen that offer before.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. One day I remember saying to Zig, who was on stage like 2-3 times a week in front of huge audiences, and I said, Zig, are you promoting the newsletter? People can sign up. And he said, what newsletter? So Zig, we're missing huge opportunities. You're out there talking to tens of thousands of people every month, and they all should be subscribers. And he did get onto it, thankfully. So Zig has been gone how long now?
10 years.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Just over
It seems
10
like it was
years.
just yesterday, we were sitting around a lunch table talking to him.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have a lot of memories like that as well. And he left you with all these volumes of books and materials that recordings. Was there a time when you thought, well, Zig's gone, what do I do now? And I may need to go to a different business or find a different business. Or did you immediately know I'm going to license the Ziglar material?
I'll tell you how that conversation went. So really, John, it was about 20 years ago as a family when we really started talking about legacy, about how do we carry on the message, all the things that we have. And as we're working on that, I actually think it was Chris Friedrich who told me, it's harder to reinvent a business than it is to start a brand new one.
Yeah.
Right. Because Dad was the spokesperson. He was the name everybody recognized. It's a personality driven organization. And so we wanted to take all the intellectual property, all the brand recognition, all the things that people recognize, and we wanted to carry it on in the future. And that future is not very long if you just keep trying to sell all the stuff you've always sold, right? Yeah. Because we got to get it out of there. And then of course, Dad passed away in November 10 years ago. And a few months later, I was out in Fort Myers and I met Steve McKnight, who is a good friend of mine. I'm actually going to speak at his event again in Australia at the end of July. I'd spoken for him earlier. He's a big real estate investor. And so when the big meltdown happened, and the mortgage meltdown, he cleaned up. He bought like 70 properties in Fort Myers area. And so he asked me, he said, so Tom, how's the business? It's really important to me that your legacy lives on, your dad's legacy. And I said, oh, it's good. And what I meant is that people were supporting us and we were still going. He goes, well, what's your plan? And I told him the plan, which was an automatic robotic response, which was the plan. And he said, well, let me ask it to you in a different way. He said, imagine you pick up the phone and the voice on the other end says to you, I just kidnapped your wife and your daughter, and you have 1 year to increase your revenue by 10 times. What are you going to do? Or you never see your wife and your daughter again. And boy, what a business clarifying question, because it's so easy to hang on to the stuff that's pretty good, but that prevents you from reinventing and creating the business that you need. Because the stuff that's pretty good, at best, it treads water for a time. And you've probably tried all the things to increase it. And so my immediate response is we need help. We need more people getting the word out. And that's when we came up with what we call our Ziglar Legacy Certification. And that's where somebody who's a business owner, a speaker, a trainer, somebody might be a consultant who also really values and loves the Ziglar material would come through, get licensed and certified to go out and teach it. And then they could be then authorized to go out and create their own business. And initially, John, we thought, wow, speakers and trainers are going to love this because they're already out there and they need more content, and what better brand to carry. But then it turned out that business owners actually liked it even better, because they came back and said, well, I built my business on your dad's philosophy. You just made my job really easy. And so they weren't even really out there selling it. They were just using it for internal training and development of their people. And so that was kind of that flip into, okay, so how do we carry this on in a new way? And then of course we had to create new programs, new materials. An example of that is when Dad passed away, there were 36 Zig Ziglar books published. Now there are 45.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because we've gone back into the archives and taken some of the audio programs that he developed, transcribed them, and turned them into books.
Yeah.
And what's amazing to me is that they're more relevant now than they were when he gave this speech 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I just smile when I think of all the disruption that we're in, especially the disruption that AI is going to cause and create, because the books are all about human relationships, which is really the one thing that AI is never going to master, is that human relationship. And so as we get more technologically advanced, we lose the old skill sets of how to have a conversation over a cup of coffee, the principles and values that really matter. And so Dad's stuff is just keeps coming back to the top of the pile. This never gets old. So I put it in the category of wisdom, and that's what the world needs today more than ever.
So of all of his points of wisdom, which 2 or 3 pop up the most yet today?
So the most common is his famous quote, "You can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want."
Yeah.
That's like probably 5 to 1, 10 to 1. I get business cards from people and that's their tagline. I get emails from people and that's their tagline. It's kind of like I'm a little bit easier to understand than somebody puts in the golden rule. It's people have built careers and businesses off of that. So that's by far the leader.
Yeah. And I use that more than any tagline of the taglines that I use. And I think teaching and franchising, those are the 2 areas that I'm involved in, and the 2 areas where I can help more people get what they want. It's just that I apply that all the time to what I'm doing. What else comes up? I mean, Zig wrote Born to Win, See You at the Top. These were bestsellers. Are they still popular? And do those messages come back to you, or are there other messages?
There's really 2 or 3 books that get mentioned over and over again. See You at the Top, and that's the one that sold millions and millions and millions of copies. That was like that's an iconic book in the industry. Secrets of Closing the Sale. I mean, it came out in the 80s. I think it was 84. And it was I was 12, so that was 77. That book, it was the first pure sales book that ever made the New York Times bestseller list.
Mm-hmm.
And more people today who had sales in their background credit that book with where they've been. The sequel to See at the Top was Over the Top, and that was hugely successful. And then the last book that while Dad was alive was Born to Win. And that's really a summation, a combination of everything. So those are the 4 books that get mentioned the most. I think probably the reason Born to Win gets mentioned as much as the others is it's electronic. We make it really easy for people to get, we use it as a way to attract and capture clients and stuff like that. So there's a lot of them out there.
So your business now, Zig's business was being out there speaking at $50,000 per event. And sometimes he did 3 of those events in a week, maybe more at times. And so it was heavily driven by Zig being out on stage speaking and then, of course, selling products in the back of the room. It's changed now. You still have some of that because you're out speaking, you're selling products, but is the licensing portion or the certification, is that the business now?
So here's an interesting twist. So initially we were certifying speakers and trainers to go out face to face with a live audience, and that went gung ho. And then we started coaching, and we created some coaching programs. And my book, Choose to Win, came out in 2019. And I wrote that book with the idea that it's a perfect kind of personal development, life coaching system. And so we wrote a coaching program around it. And then we went to my attorney, Scott Reeb, who's our small business attorney. And I said, hey, we need to have a licensing agreement for our coaches, and we need to make sure it's clean and everything. And so he's a business guy, and he comes back to me and he says, instead of making all these coaches come to Dallas through a face-to-face training, why don't you do it on Zoom, on a webinar format? Well, this was 2019.
Yeah.
And I realized, well, we have people in Australia and Asia and all over who want this. And that sounded like a good idea, especially since the wear and tear on head and hair and cost and all that stuff is really reduced for everybody. So at the end of 2019, we did that. And we sold out the first class because we limit them to 25. We sold it out almost instantly. And so we said, because we're pretty smart, we said, well, let's try that again. And so we did another one in January of 2020, and it sold out immediately.
Wow.
And then what happened in 2020 in March? The world shut down, and the only thing that you could do was online stuff. It was it's almost like God had sent that message in advance. And then all of a sudden, everybody who had always wanted to learn how to become a coach, they not only had the time, they had the money to learn. And so now about 400 coaches later around the world, out there. And so we have the Choose to Win coaching and the See at the Top coaching, and we bundle that in the Ziglar coaching system. And so that's probably the biggest part of our business, is supporting, equipping coaches who like to do the one-on-one coaching around the Ziglar philosophy and principles, around the wheel of life, around the principles and values, around belief and self-image, the things that every human deals with. And that's really the big aspect of what we do. The second thing that also happened because of the pandemic is when I did the book deal with Choose to Win, the publisher, Thomas Nelson, when they got the proposal, they loved it. And they said, but there's one thing we want to do. And they said, we want to make it a 2-book deal, and we'll pay you twice as much money. I was like,
yeah, nice.
Let me think about it. Okay. And then I said, but I don't know what the second book is going to be. And they said, you've got some time. So that conversation happened in 2018. And I was supposed to have the manuscript to them in the middle of 19. Or the end of 19. And then they said, no, don't worry about it. You can get it out by April or May of 2020. And then they delayed that a little bit. And then the pandemic kicked off. And so all I've done really since March of 2020 is study the disruption that business has had, how that's changed how we lead people, and how people's values and priorities have shifted, because it's a completely different environment now than it was before March of 2020. And that's how the book 10 Leadership Virtues for Disruptive Times took off. So we have these two things. Well, now when I travel, it's all about leadership in times of disruption. It's an evergreen subject. And I'm telling you that the disruption that's coming is going to make the pandemic look like kindergarten as far as business goes and the way our lives are.
So what's that disruption that's going to make the pandemic look like kindergarten?
Well, we've already seen some huge shifts, and we see it in the newspaper every day still, and that is, the world has become much more cause and value and purpose driven from people. Like, I want to work somewhere that I feel like my life's energy is creating something of value. There's a problem I solve. There's that peace of mind at night that my product or service, my company does good for humanity. And then because of the lockdowns and people working from home, people suddenly discovered that there was more to life than an hour commute and then 8.5 hours in an office and then another hour commute. They discovered their health, their family relationships, and strangely enough, productivity went up for people who were already pretty solid, and there was a little bit of an infrastructure for them to work in. And companies got more output focused. They got more outcome focused rather than output focused.
Right.
Output is watching keystrokes or I can see you working. Outcome is a clear vision of what the desired result was. John, you go do it, make it happen. And so the relationship changed. Well, now people are working from home and they're having good outcomes, and the leadership cannot be command and control anymore, right? Do it because I said so. We call it the T-Rex leader. That doesn't work. And so it takes a new type of leader, and that's the coach leader. Well, so that's the foundation of where we are, what people value, where they want to work. And big companies are trying to bring their people back into the office, and you see all these mini revolts going on. I think there's certain circumstances where it really makes a lot of sense to do that. There's certain big businesses, I think they're doing exactly the right thing. But a lot of individuals are like, with the job market as tight as it is, I can go work wherever I want. And if that doesn't work for me, then they're going to make that kind of choice. Well, now AI is coming. And depending on who you read, 40 to 80% of the jobs that we currently have are no longer going to exist because of AI. And that means that new jobs are going to be created, because every time there's a technological wave, productivity goes up, performance goes up, whatever the cost of that product was goes dramatically down, which means people have a lot more money to go and spend, and people never run out of wants. That's right. They shift a little bit. So there's going to be more growth that happens. But the question is, how do you tell somebody who's 55 years old, whose health span or lifespan's going to be another 30, maybe 40 years, and 20 good years of productivity? How do you tell them that what you've invested your life in learning and becoming the expert in, you're no longer needed because AI is here? And so that's a mindset issue. And just to get into the underpinning of that, as humans, we have two types of intelligence. We have fluid intelligence and we have crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence is like athletic ability. It peaks in our mid-20s, maybe early 30s, and then it starts to go downhill. Fluid intelligence is what allows somebody to win a Nobel Prize, solve a physics problem, create music that nobody's ever heard before, launch a tech company, because your brain is able to handle literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different activities at the same time, innovate and create. But that peaks around our 30s, early 30s, and we're no longer able to do that. That's why people who are very successful in their early career get frustrated later on, because they're trying to rely on fluid intelligence. But here's the good news. The good news is that fluid intelligence gets replaced by crystallized intelligence. And that is our knowledge and our experience, and we commonly call it wisdom. And so as we age and are crystallized, we can now make sense of the data. And so what's crazy to me is most young people are excited about artificial intelligence and what it brings to the future. And most older people are nervous about it because they think they're about to be eliminated.
Yeah.
The reality is actually the exact opposite, because if I'm older and I learn how to leverage AI so that I can gather data that allows me to use my crystallized intelligence and relationship building, I'm no longer at a disadvantage. I've actually got something a young person can only gain through time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that disruption is happening, but in the middle of that disruption, there's going to be a lot of upset. And so I encourage leaders to embrace it, to get excited about it. And so really you should be asking yourself, how can you use AI to leverage your existing skills, your existing business, the things that you do well? And in order to leverage it, you've got to understand it. And then there's something else that's important, is we've got to focus on what AI will never be able to do. And that's to build that relationship person to person. So if I'm constantly working on self-improvement and relationship skills, and whatever business that I do, whatever career that I have, if I'm constantly figuring out, okay, here's my superpower and here's how AI can make me more effective in that, then the future, and it's bright. Mm-hmm. But as soon as I choose not to participate, it's going to leave me in the dust.
Yeah. So did AI tell you, and I know it didn't, but it's a good transition. Did AI tell you, don't franchise, Tom, license? There's a difference, between the two. And you've got 400 licensees today. Why aren't they franchisees? Why isn't there the Ziglar franchise?
Yeah, we explored that path in several different ways, looking at franchising or a more sophisticated model. And I think it just came down to, we're an intellectual property company, and it takes a certain sort of human to really get that and buy into the Ziglar philosophy. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing is we decided we wanted a very, quite frankly, lopsided agreement in our favor that basically said, if you violate any of our moral and ethics and philosophical things, we still love you. You'll still be part of the family. You're just not going to represent us anymore. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of a family decision, that we wanted that kind of layer of protection, that because people who come through, they're all in, and, their attorneys say, you don't have much recourse if they decide they don't like you anymore. And we're like, yeah, that's the way it's written.
Yeah. So, which is similar to franchise companies as well. You can't violate their principles. Chick-fil-A comes to mind. You won't last in that organization. Service Master is another one. A lot of them that embrace principles that if you violate this, you're out. We'll still be friends, but you can't be our franchisee. And there isn't a franchise agreement that isn't lopsided in favor of the franchisor. But what are the freedoms that licensing gives you instead of the restrictive franchise?
Yeah, it probably has to do with just the obligation of support, and the maybe part of it was the startup and creation of the initial program and those kind of things. Looking back at it when we started and where we are now, one thing we learned is that the more significant the initial investment, the greater probability of success. Mm-hmm. Which is it's just that qualifying factor. So I think that's one significant advantage that a franchise has.
Yeah.
Over what we're doing.
Yeah.
So that's probably,
Yeah.
the main reason.
Which reminds me that we once did in the early 90s, I believe, the Zig Ziglar Network. And I wrote a book with Zig Ziglar that unfortunately we never hear about anymore. I don't anyway. Network Marketing for Dummies.
Yes.
Big book at the time. And we had great hopes for it. And it did pretty well out there. A lot of speaking engagements related to that, a lot of publicity related to network marketing for dummies. But the Zig Ziglar network was not the right route to go when we tried it.
No, it wasn't. We made two classic business mistakes. So I actually write about this in my book, Choose to Win. This is my $2 million education that I can smile about now, but it wasn't too much fun back then.
No.
So he's like an icon in the network marketing industry. Any top 50 networking company had him speak. And so many people who love that as a vehicle to, their careers will say, hey, I learned everything I know, or a lot of what I know about life and about business from Zig Ziglar. And so we overestimated Dad's impact and pull of people into the industry, into our Zig Ziglar network. That was in every consultant, and we had 5 or 6 high-paid consultants. All of them told us the same thing, except for one, that your problem is keeping up with it's going to be keeping up with the growth. That's what they all told us our problem was going to be. And so we launched it, and we had a really fast start. I mean, the first 30 or 45 days was unbelievable. But the problem with that industry is the formula has to be exactly right, and the timing has to be right. And you have to hit this massive inertia before it loses steam, right? It's the snowball that you start down the hill. If it stops, 5 feet off the top, it's never going again, right? And you have to roll up another one and start it down the hill. And so it became a money pit to feed. And the product line that we had, we made another decision. We had a nutraceutical line that was the highest quality. And when we launched, the rage that everybody loved was ephedra, which is now banned. And we looked at all the research, and ephedra got dramatic results. You could take it and you could feel different and lose weight very quickly. But we started seeing that it wasn't healthy, right? It wasn't a long-term strategy. And so we made the decision that none of our products were going to be based on anything other than what's best for your health today and long-term. And so, our product that we came out with, we felt like was the best, but we didn't sacrifice the moral high ground for instant results. Which that's a keynote of that industry is you take something, you want to feel different.
Is network marketing still a market for you, for Ziglar Corporation?
I do. What's interesting is I've done recently 3 or 4 large events working with an Amway group, Equipo Vision. They're the largest group in North America, I believe. All Spanish. So
wow.
I go.
And are you speaking in Spanish, or do you bring your wife with you?
Yeah, my wife should go. They actually have a translator there, and they translate me.
Okay.
And it's been a lot of personal development and leadership. So their leadership groups is who I'm working with. So it's fantastic.
Good. And what about the franchise networks? Are they still popular for you?
Not so much. I haven't done maybe just a couple myself. Dad would, of course, he would speak and do that. which is really interesting because I can remember us having a lot of conversations about this. And I said, well, what makes a successful franchise owner, right? Not the franchisor, but the franchisee.
Yeah.
And we basically came down to two things. This is my memory. Number one is they work the system that corporate has created, right?
Absolutely.
They just go right after it. And two, they know they're in the people development business. And so they spend all their energy developing the right people on their team and motivating and inspiring them so they understand the role of leadership and developing and equipping their people. Well, that's really what Ziglar does better than anybody in the world, right? Is we help individuals and organizations understand how to develop and equip your people and yourself as a leader. And so that's always been a mystery to me. And all I can sit back and say is that there's an attitude that happens, and that is, well, I'm a franchisee, so corporate has to provide me with all of my training, right? And so they kind of lock their brains into, this is the only way that I'm going to get training and support. But if you were to go interview the top 5 or 10%, they don't have that mindset at all. They look at their business and go, what's going to make us better tomorrow than we are today? And if corporate's not going to provide it and it's within the ability of the contract, they're going to go get it and do it.
Yeah.
So.
And it's amazing to me, almost 50 years into franchising, since I started writing about it in the late 70s, it's amazing to me that the top 2 points that you say, follow the system and develop people. Help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want. Franchisees don't get it, but worse than that, franchisors don't get it. That's what they're not providing. They don't do, for example, a basic disc profile, which tells you a lot of information about a person, about their ability to win in a franchise. Just giving them a basic disc profile, which costs almost nothing. Most franchisors don't do this. So they bring on franchisees who have a lot of money or some money, and maybe it's all the money they've got, and the franchisee invests that, but the franchisor doesn't know how to teach them, doesn't know how to lead them, doesn't know how to coach them. They don't know who they are, really, and they don't know what to provide. So the leadership is lost, and the personal development doesn't happen. And then the franchisee, for whatever reason, decides, well, I think, I know what the system says, but I think I could do it better. And that's always a fatal mistake. And franchisee after franchisee continue to make that mistake.
And that to me is just crazy because one of the principles is we need to communicate the way the person likes to be communicated to.
Exactly.
I mean, that sounds a little bit like you can have everything in life you want,
right?
If you just help enough other people get what they want. What they want is clear language that they understand, right? And so if you're talking to an accountant about something, that's a different conversation versus a high D or a cheerleader or I'm an S. I'm a relationship guy. We need to talk about personal stuff, right? And now let's just look at AI. There's a company that we're working with called Humantech. And they have a tool where you can take somebody's email address and plug it in, and it will go and scrub their LinkedIn account and tell you with 86% accuracy whether they're a D, an I, or an S or a C in the DISC system. Which means that every email you send to them could be written in the style that they are most likely to respond to.
Yeah.
They even have a tool where you can write out the email yourself and then ask it to write this to a high D.
Yeah.
And it will take
That's amazing.
And so if I'm in sales of any kind and it's a significant product or service that I'm asking investment wise, why wouldn't I do that? And so I would think most franchisees are pretty fees are pretty high, and the more successful franchisees I have, the better long term my business will be.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but franchisors often just they don't get their focus off making the sale, and they miss a lot of Ziglar philosophy that making the sale doesn't come so easily, particularly if you're not helping people get what they want. And those people become your validators. When you don't know if they're a D, I, S, or C, you don't know how to communicate with them. You don't know how to lead them. You don't know how to teach them. This is one of the big pitfalls in franchising today. AI will help that if franchisors ever embrace the idea that it's important to know the personality, the skills and the characteristics of people who you're bringing into your network. And oftentimes they bring the wrong people into the network. It's the old story about putting the right people in the right seats on the bus. That doesn't happen. As simple as that is, it's shameful.
And in our leadership program, so we've created a leadership program called Coach Leadership. So we talk about becoming a coach leader. And everybody who comes through the program, we do a leadership disc on that person who's coming through. And then that person is a leader. And so we include leadership discs for 4 of their direct reports. And then we coach that leader on how to coach their people. We've actually got a system, an intentional coaching conversation system. And part of that system is understanding the way that person's wired and communicating to them in a way that's going to have them receive the information. And then because it's coaching, it's all questions based. And so if I have a direct report and I'm asking them questions, which include, how would you solve that problem? What do you think you can do to improve yourself? What goals do you think you should set? And then that person starts to clarify this and write it down. They've just created their own plan.
Yeah.
Which means they have ownership, which means as a leader, I get to ask a really fun question, which is, hey, John, is it okay if I hold you accountable to your goals? I mean, what are you going to say?
Right.
And so, but that communication, that the understanding their personality is huge.
So today I teach at the Titus Center for Franchising the Gen Z population. These are the people you were talking about before who want to make a change, who want to make a difference, who don't care about having a job for a job's sake, not important to them. If the job doesn't lead to changing something for the better, whether it's their church, their school, their community, their state, their country, the world, they're not interested in working for you or with you. What do you say to them in your 10 leadership virtues for disruptive times? Tell the Gen X's and the Gen Zs, what do they need to know?
Yeah, so here it is. I was speaking to a group, and this was a high level mastermind, so very successful people in the room. And one of the people in the room said, aren't Gen Z or the younger people, aren't they hard to lead? Aren't they entitled? That was like the subtext. And I said, so here's my response. Well, they get that rap. I think it's a bad rap in most cases. I said, but let me tell you about that younger group. At that age of, say, 25 or 30, they've had more inputs on their brain through social media and the internet than me at 58 had my whole life. So my view is they are much better at discerning whether a leader's motives are pure or not. They can tell if you've got a mask on. So I don't think it's they're harder to lead. I think it's they have a higher standard of what they expect in a leader, because they are also balancing quality of life against their work. And my dad, Zig Ziglar, said in the 70s, he said, if standard of living is your objective, your quality of life almost never goes up. If quality of life is your objective, your standard of living almost always goes up. So what was he saying? He was saying that the more solid your quality of life is, the more productive and effective you're going to be at whatever job you do. And so in big companies, the number one issue today is the health and well-being of their people, right? The mental, burnout and stress and depression and all the things that we hear in the news every day, that's killing productivity more than everything. Yeah. So what we teach in our coach leadership program is the antidote to that is quality of life. And so here's how you link it together. If you have Gen Z on your team, you've got to build a relationship and find out what their bigger goal or purpose is in life. What's their why? And then you've got to share the vision for your business every single day. You got to say, hey, here's the problem we solve. Here's the difference we make in the community. This is why we're a great place to invest your time. And then you come back and you say, and oh, by the way, if you love our vision and our mission, the problem we solve, the better you do at your job, the faster you're going to get your dreams, because dreams take time and money. And so what happens when somebody does a great job every single day? They either make more commission, get promoted, get a raise, or they get hired away. I mean, that's just the reality. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to lead with your vision. I talk about the 3 V's: vision, values, and virtues. So top performers, they want to know the vision that your organization has, the difference it makes. Mm-hmm. Second, they want to know the values that are like the umbrella that kind of keep the organization on track. And then they want to be treated with the virtues, because virtues are how we respect each other, our humility, our kindness, our love, all these different virtues. If you don't get the 3 V's correct, the vision, the values, and the virtues, you're going to lose top performers of all ages on a regular basis, because they know they can work anywhere.
Absolutely. That's great information, Tom. And I want to thank you for today. This was one of the best segments I've recorded, and I know people are going to enjoy it, and they're going to be getting back to us over these points of information. And thanks for joining me.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast with Dr. John P. Hayes. Tune in next time for more conversation around all things franchising.